All right, good evening, everyone. It's Brooklyn Nights in the house. I want to thank everyone for your patience. We had a time zone snafu, and so I thought that the broadcast was supposed to start at a certain time in Bermuda, but my guests were like, no, it's supposed to start at this time where they are. So there was a time zone snafu. But we are here, we are live. So we're just going to wait for a few people to jump on. I want to say thank you to Lily. Lily, how do you say your last name? You're on mute. Let me. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Last name is pronounced Luchesi.
Luchesi. So I want to thank Lily Luchesi for being with us today. I'm very excited to have her. I also have Hadley Ray Dean. Hadley, are you there?
I'm here. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we have another editor who is going to be joining us any minute. Her name is Rebekah Dodson, and she is my editor. So that's how I know her. But I'm really excited about having a robust discussion about editing. It's a very important post-writing step, a post-writing pre-publishing step. And I really want to talk about what that looks like from the editor's point of view. Hi, Trevina. Trevina says, hey. So we've got some people that are showing up. Gracie, hi, Gracie. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm just super excited. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with my Brooklyn Night theme music and get this party started. All right, so it's Brooklyn in the house. Some of you know me, some of you don't, but I am grateful, like I said, to everyone for joining in. Before we get started, because we are still waiting for one editor to show up. Hi, Aaron. Yes, that is too. Every time I play the Brooklyn Night theme music, somebody says something. But yes, thank you. And that is courtesy of Al Francis Productions, who took my vision as a romance author and just put some music and some spice to it. We've got people showing up. Hi, Prince. Thank you for joining us. I do hope you will be edified by this discussion. What I want to do right now is I want to what I call commercials. So let me start with that. I want to talk about this really quickly. This is a release that's coming out. I think it's on October the 18th. It's called Bossy, and it's an interracial romance short story collection by a new author named Florian Green. And when I met Florian on Facebook. So that's the first thing. He messaged me and he was like, would you take a moment just to read some of my romance? And I was blown away. Florian is from Scotland. He's a Scotsman. He very quickly informed me that he's not English. So I learned that he's a Scotsman. He has written this book called Bossy. And I tell you guys, the writing style is fresh. It is sexy. It's right up. If you love interracial romance, then you are going to love Florian's book, Bossy. You need to go to Amazon. You need to one-click this. I think it's $2.99, and you will not be disappointed. I promise you that you won't be disappointed. Okay, that said, let me just see. Rebekah said she will be here in a couple of minutes. So let's get started. And when she comes, she will pop in. Lily, Hadley, how about you start by just kind of introducing yourself, saying hi to the viewers that we have so far.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lily. I am actually here because I'm Rebekah Dodson's editor, the author that's about to join us. That's the reason that she invited me. And I am the co-owner of Partners in Crime Book Services. Hi. Ooh, I like that comment down there. I've been editing for 9 years now. I did take a few-year break when my own author career took off. I predominantly edit romance, urban fantasy, and horror. And with romance, it's all subgenres. But I have also edited nonfiction, literary fiction. It's a lot of fun delving into different genres, and I'm very excited to be here to talk about my various experiences compared with everyone else's.
Awesome. Thank you, Lily. And you actually started to kind of go into some of the questions that I have. So I'll pull back a bit, but it's really important to know that you have experience editing these various genres, because based on what I know, and I will be looking to you for confirmation on this, there are different techniques and different things that you're looking for when it comes to different genres. I see you nodding. So
Yes.
yeah, okay, awesome. Okay, so hold on, because I want to pick your brain, and there's so much I want to talk about. Hadley, can you introduce yourself to us and let us know a little bit about you?
Sure. And thank you for having me, Brooklyn. I appreciate it. I was having a bit of a day today, so I'm glad I was able to get in and be able to speak with you today. So anyway, my name is Hadley Ray Dean. I am an author as well as an editor. I've actually been editing longer than I've been an author. Since about 2008, I started editing at 3 different e-publishing houses, and I've been a content editor as well as a line editor. Since then, whenever I moved on to being an independent author, I've gone into freelance editing. So I have a bunch of clients that still come to me that were authors that I worked with back in the day that still, they're now freelance. They're now in indie publishing. So they're asking me to do their edits for them. So I'm also content editor and editor and line editor for them as well. And I've done multiple genres, including romance, sci-fi, paranormal, all those things. Right now, main focus is on romance, but I've done all those other genres as well.
Awesome. And RK said it's good to know that. I think I'm not sure if RK is, I think it's a she, was talking about Lily, but I think it's the same thing. You guys have, experience in different genres, and that is so important. So I want to get into that. I see Rebekah. Rebekah, are you with us?
I am. I'm sorry, my webcam just decided to not work right now, so I've got to try to plug it in here.
Well, that's okay. We were just doing introductions. Are you prepared to just introduce yourself? If you want to, there you. I see you.
Yeah, but my webcam for some reason just doesn't want to work, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I see it. It's glitching a little bit.
I know, and it's never done this before, ever.
Maybe it's because you look so beautiful. Like, I can't handle this. You look fabulous. So you guys, Rebekah's, she's sorting hers out, but that is my editor. And when she comes in, she will get her to introduce herself. But what I've noticed thus far, guys, so Lily and Hadley, is that Lily, please confirm, but I think that you are also an author. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so what is up with that? Like, tell us a bit about, like, I think, Hadley, you said you were an author first, and I'm sorry, an editor first, and then you slid into authoring. Can you guys talk about that relationship, author versus editor?
I actually did the same. I had actually started as a blogger who then went into editing. I was requested when I was blogging, some of my blog clients had come to me and said, you found all of these corrections. Did you ever think about doing editing? Like, my biggest issue, and it's something that I do state, is I don't have a degree in creative writing or in editing or in English or anything. Mm-hmm. But when I began doing that, I was told, no, you don't do this for free, you get paid for it. Okay. And then I studied, I was already planning to be an author, but the editing took off first, and I quit for a little while to focus solely on the author career. And last year, I picked it back up permanently as a full-time job. And it's a very strange difference, because once you're editing, you look at your own work with such an overly critical eye, even more so than before. Mm-hmm. But it's also necessary, and like I would never recommend any author who's also an editor to edit their own work. That's not something that I think is a good idea.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I'm glad you said that, because that was actually one of my questions. But let me pull back on that one. Hadley, tell us a bit about your experience going from editing to authoring and then perhaps back again. What has that looked like for you?
Sure. So I had edited several hundred books, it feels like, between 2008 and maybe 2013. And in that time, and working with different authors and giving suggestions and content editing a line, they suggested that maybe I should write my own books because I was giving good ideas on their books. So I tried my hand at it and submitted a book, and it was accepted at one of the e-publishing houses that I didn't work for. I actually submitted outside of it. I just wanted to see if it would be accepted. So then, as I got away from editing as much and was doing more of the author bit. And then I had those authors that I worked with in the past come back to me and ask me, hey, are you still editing? Or can you do this freelance for us? And then that's how I got back into doing the editing piece of it. So now I'm juggling both.
Awesome. And Lily, you said that you don't recommend that authors also edit. And tell us more about that. And then obviously, Hadley, I would like for you to chime in on what your thoughts are about authors editing their own books.
There are two reasons that an author shouldn't self-edit, and one of them is when we write the books, when we're going through to edit, there are times our brains will supply what is missing. If there's a missing word, wrong punctuation, our minds won't see it. So that's the number one reason. The number two reason, which is actually something that a lot of authors who aren't editors do, is over-edit. They'll never think the book is perfect. I'll never think any of my books are perfect. So it is always better to hand it off to someone else who can tell you, no, here is when you stop. This is good. This is great. Don't overdo it on yourself and on your work, because that's doing your work a disservice.
Mm-hmm. Hadley, what are your thoughts? And then Rebekah, I'm gonna get to you.
I know, I'm sorry. The technical difficulties here are ridiculous.
No, that's fine. We know how technology works or doesn't work. We get it.
Yes.
So Hadley, what are your thoughts about authors also being editors and editing their own work?
So I tend to agree with that. And the reason being is I've tried both ways, where I've had an editor work on my books, and then I've also self-edited. And I agree with what Lily said, and you go over the top, and a book that I was supposed to have out in March didn't come out until June because I kept looking at it and it was like, this is insane. And then, and also when it seems like when readers know that you're an editor and then you put out your book, then they're like, oh, well, I thought you were an editor. I found a mistake. Okay, I forgot a comment. Like, don't be like that. So my next couple books that I have coming out, I am having another editor look at it just because I don't want to drive myself insane anymore. So I am going to start having other people look at my stuff.
So Rebekah, welcome. Looks like you've gotten it sorted out. So I'm just going to take it back a little bit. So everyone, Rebekah is my editor. Rebekah has been with me for the entire journey. I think you've edited every single one of I've got 2 novellas that you didn't edit.
Yeah, except for the first one. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you. Can you guys hear her? Lily and Hadley? Okay.
We can hear her.
Okay, awesome. So this is my esteemed editor. She's been with me from the beginning. So Rebekah, we're talking about being an author and an editor, which you are. You are an author, but you're also a professional editor. Lily suggested that authors should never edit their own work. What are your thoughts about that?
So it's actually kind of funny that we're all here because Lily is actually my editor, or rather I should say proofreader. So I'm absolutely very much into never editing your own work. Like I see authors all the time that just don't have the resources to edit. And I'm like, you need to find somebody, you need to save up, or you need to trade services or do something. Because like Hadley was saying, I've had reviews where people were like, oh, there's a typo. It's like, oh, that typo survived 2 editors and a proofreader. Way to go, typo. So it's being an author is just really different because there's sometimes that I will I'll see stuff that Lily's edited on there and I'll be like, how did I miss this? And I just feel so stupid, you know. So I always tell people like, oh, you're an editor and an author. I hope someone else is editing your stuff because there's no way you're going to be able to do that.
Yeah. And again, it sounds like you guys are pretty much on the same page with that advice that if you are an author, you know, it gets to the point where you just become very close to the work. And like Lily said, your mind will supplement material that's not even there. Like you think you wrote it and your brain will just read the sentence that's rife with errors. And so, yeah.
Right.
Chantel is asked, how long do you take to edit a book? So I guess we can go around and you guys can answer that.
Well, the first thing is that there isn't really a linear timeline to go through for when you're editing a book. Each book requires a different amount of work. I think every book should go through an author's proofread, which they do call a self-edit. It's obviously not going to be as much. So an author should go through their book at least twice. I recommend once you finish a book, wait 2 weeks, read it over twice, then send it to your editor. For me, I could take as long as a few days. It could take as long as 2 weeks just for the initial first round, depending on what the book requires. And also the length of the book, of course, as well. I mean, you know, my 40,000 word urban fantasies are not going to take as long as my last client's 200,000, you know, epic fantasy. You know, there's a big difference. So I think an author should expect to do their self-edits, get the initial edits done, which would mostly be content edits, go back for the line edits. For me, I actually do them all at once, and then I do double over. So most of the time it should take probably 2 months minimum, depending again on what the book needs. If your book needs rewrites, it could take anywhere from weeks. It could take days depending on how quick of a writer you are. So it does all depend, but you should at least bank on 2 weeks for your initial edits to be done.
Anyone else want to kind of chime in on that?
I would say I totally agree with Lily that 2 weeks is a pretty good timeline. I know that me and Lily are usually really fast because we stay up all hours of the night to get things done. It depends on like what the book needs too, because I've had projects where it was the author's first time and struggled with line editing. So like I had to fix dialogue tags, I had to fix spelling and grammar. And so for those clients, I usually say that it's going to be 3 or 4 weeks because this needs so much work. So I would say 2 to 4 weeks is probably what I usually tell people. But that's also why it's important to send a sample to your editor, because then they can give you a more accurate assessment of your work. So like if I see a chapter and I'm like, oh boy, this needs a lot of work, and then I can say, okay, for you, 30 days. Whereas if I find like 2 errors, I might say, you know, okay, 2 weeks.
Awesome. Hadley, what are your thoughts?
I agree with what everybody is saying here. If it's an author that I've worked with before and I know that their work is pretty clean, I know if they come to me and they have a deadline of, you know, 2 weeks from now, for example, I just had an author send me something and she needed it back in 2 weeks. Well, I've worked with her before on several of her books. I know it's going to be fairly clean and I know I can get through her stuff quickly. So I was able to meet that 2 week deadline. But if it's a new author and, you know, I'm not familiar with their work, I usually tell them to give me at least 3 weeks and then I can look at it. And then sometimes it'll be shorter, sometimes it'll be longer, just depending on, you know, their experience. And, you know, like Chantel said, if I have to fix dialogue tags and things of that nature, so it could be longer. Because if it takes me an hour to get through a chapter, that's gonna take some time. So yeah, I agree with what the ladies are saying here.
Yeah, and that's great because you know, Rebekah and I have been working together for years, and I think it's to the point where Rebekah will say, she'll be like, Brooklyn, you just need a proofread. Whereas in the beginning, she might have requested something a little more just so she could understand my writing style. So it really does depend on the client, the relationship, and the editor knowing what they're getting into. Here's an interesting question from RK. She says, "It seems that you guys are a team. How did you guys find your team?" So let me start, because like I said, Rebekah and I have worked together for years. I found Rebekah. There was actually a Facebook site. I think it was that.
Wasn't it 20 to 50K books editors or something? It was like an editing page, yeah.
And so I found Rebekah on Facebook, but it's kind of like what she said. I requested a sample, and that was good because she was able to see my style. I was able to see how she was edited, and we were able to determine that whether or not our relationship would work. Rebekah, how did you meet Lily? How did you guys come together as a team?
I don't even remember really, Lily. I think we just had the same.
We were actually friends before we started. We've been talking, and your former editor, I think she's your former editor. I haven't seen her. I'm not sure, so I'm not going to assume that. She didn't have space for you. And she came to me and said, "I see that you're mutual friends with Rebekah." She said, "I know you. I know your style. Will you help out my clients?" And that was almost 2 years ago now. And yeah, it's been 2 years ever since. And it worked really well. There are sometimes, you'll get a client you don't click with. It happens as an editor. And thankfully, Rebekah and we work really well together.
Awesome.
I have previously had very expensive editors, and because I'm an English teacher, my writing is typically pretty clean. And so when I met Lily, she was really honest with, hey, I think that you probably just need a proofreading, which I've spent hundreds of dollars on editing for them to change so little, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. And so I think Lily has done like my last 4 or 5 books, and she'll always say, "Well, it's not really my genre, but it's a good book." And so I get all excited because, even though it's maybe something she doesn't like to read, she's also like really good at communicating. So I really appreciate it. And I've also cut my editing budget in half this year just because we've been able to work together a little better. I actually owe her a book like yesterday, so let's not talk about that.
Yes, you do owe me a book.
I'm going to finish it tomorrow, I swear to God. I just got behind in school.
Hadley, how did you find your editor?
So I have not worked with an editor for a while, and that's why I'm trying to pick one up. I'm reaching out to a fellow author who is also an editor that's going to be reading over my next book. So the editor that I had before she was moving in a different direction and helping her daughter out with her business. So when she decided that she wanted to move on, I started self-editing my books, and then I fell into that rut of what we were just talking about. So that's why I had to go back and try to find somebody. So I'll be picking up an editor here soon.
Awesome. And I think, and that's good, because it seems as if, when we collectively think about our situations, we're all, Hadley is in a different space than we are, because I am with Rebekah, and that, we're talking about teams, and you guys are a team. Rebekah and I are a team, and I know Rebekah knows my style. I actually have a question about creative license, and I want to know from you guys, what does that look like for you when you think about like the grammar, the proper grammatical structure versus the author's voice and the author's style and creative license? How do you guys weave that into your work?
That's actually something that I recently was talking to someone else about, when it comes to keeping your author's voice.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they will change, like, especially, I had one client who loved single lines for a suspenseful moment.
Yeah.
And I do too. A lot of my favorite Big Five authors do as well. And when you read a lot of the books, they'll say, "No, you really shouldn't do that." Multiple, yes. Certain voices. An edit I just finished for one of my other clients who considers me part of her team. She had a character who speaks French Cajun, and so his dialogue is stilted. There are a lot of things that look like, "Oh my God, this is a huge error." But once you know the character, I'm not going to change that. I'm
Yeah.
not going to change that character's voice. That's not, an editor should not touch your voice. An editor should make your voice stronger.
Yes. And that's important because I knew at one point I was considering another editor and I sent her the sample and she touched my voice. And I had no choice but to be like, Rebekah wouldn't have. And it wasn't like a critical, because it was grammatically correct. But it just highlighted that, wow, Rebekah knows my style. She knows my characters. And Rebekah, I'm like doing a whole commercial for Rebekah. I'm like just pumping up Rebekah right now. But she knows my style. And so that solidified, again, going back to team. Rebekah is a part of my team because she knows me and my characters. So that was great. What do you think, Rebekah, about voice and creative license?
So, as a writing teacher, I think that protecting voice is really, really important because I work with a lot of students that don't have one yet, and so they're very developing it. And so, like, I'll use Brooklyn's last book as an example. She doesn't use dialogue tags, like no he said, she said. And so I always leave those alone because she's got great action in between. And it's really important, I think, to protect the style that the author is writing in and making sure that what they're trying to say is being communicated. And I've had a lot of clients that come to me and go, well, this other person like over edited my work and just totally destroyed it. And so I think that's one of the things that I especially love working with Lily too. She doesn't mess with that suspense line thing because I know I do that. Like everything's on a separate line because I'm trying to draw the moment out. And so I think an editor's job should be protect your voice because otherwise it's your book, not the author's, right? Yeah. If you as the editor change what they're trying to say, then it becomes your property and not theirs. And I don't want to, be responsible for that. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Good stuff. Hadley, what are your thoughts?
So I like to form a relationship with my authors whenever I'm working with them. So I know what their voice is. So whenever I'm reading their stuff, I'll know, okay, for example, I'm working with an author right now. I've edited 2 or 3 of her books, and I know that she has, some people that are from Louisiana. So I know that occasion's going to be in there when, in the style of talking. So I know her voice. I know where she's trying to come from or where she's trying to come from. So I'm not going to change that. If it's a word they use and it's not the right definition, I'll usually send them a comment of, hey, is this what you meant to say here? Is this where you're trying to go? This doesn't make sense. What were you trying to say? Instead of changing it, especially if it's like a paragraph or something, I'll ask them where they were coming from. So it really is about being able to communicate. And I saw Taisha Demay, she had just said it's important to be able to communicate with your editor. She's actually one of my authors. So I know I reach out to her a lot, when I'm editing her books to see if this is what she meant, or I'll leave her a comment. So it's good to have the open communication to see where your authors are coming from.
Gracie asks, what do you guys think about programs like these, like Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly? What are your thoughts about those?
I know what Lily's going to say probably, but I'm just going to come out and say that I cannot stand them. I think that having your stuff edited by a robot is a very, very bad idea. It's a very unpopular position, but I have students and clients that run their stuff through Grammarly, and it just destroys their voice, destroys the commas. It doesn't recognize semicolons. I'm interested to see what other people have to take on it, but I hate them both. And when I get a client that's used it, I charge extra because I have to untangle this weird mess that has been made. And I wish they would have just gone to a real person with brains instead of, a computer program. But what do you guys think?
I agree on Grammarly. I started with that before I was back to editing. Did not like it, didn't like what it did. Some of the suggestions it made were absolutely outrageous. And honestly, it made someone think I was writing drunk. With Pro Writing Aid, I like it for one reason, and that it does point out the passive voice. So if you're a newer author, I do recommend Pro Writing Aid, and they color code. Red is for spelling errors, which you have to ignore because half the time the names that are used are considered spelling errors. And the yellow lines are for grammatical errors. And when it points out passive voice, that is the only time I think I will ever say, listen to the robot. The passive voice, excuse me, is almost always correct in that manner. But for the rest of it, you need a human, and you have to look at every single thing they're suggesting, because it's artificial intelligence, and it does not replace a human whatsoever.
So
I'm sorry, Hadley, you were talking?
yeah, I was just gonna say I've used both. Grammarly, I have the premium version of it, and I only turn it on at the end of an edit just to see if I've missed anything. If I'm going through and I'm doing a content edit, I turn the Grammarly off because, like the lady said, it offers such a weird suggestions sometimes. But I feel like when I'm using the premium version and at the end of an edit, if I've missed anything, then Grammarly will pick it up. And then I use Pro Writing Aid, but out of the two of those, I feel like I like Grammarly's better.
Mm-hmm. So my experience with Grammarly, and it is very mechanical. I think if you were to, for whatever reason, accept all of their suggestions, you would come up with a very mechanical sounding document. I used it. I think it's good for academic writing. And there is a very clear difference between academic and creative writing. So when I was doing my PhD, Grammarly was suggested, and it was good for that type of writing. But when it comes to creative writing, it's horrible, to be very honest. So Gracie is like, thank you guys. She appreciates the answers, and I've learned something also. Just to get a couple of comments, Nikki said, I love that my primary editor learned my voice by my second novel. It helps maintain the integrity of the storytelling. There is nothing worse than an editor completely wrecking your voice during their process. And I mean, and that's very true. And again, coming from an editor's perspective, you really just want to maintain your style. And when you find that editor who knows how you write and they just they perfect it and polish it, it's perfect. So that's really good. Thank you, Nikki. I totally agree. I think I showed this one. Gracie just loves that you guys are protecting the author's voice. And I think that's really important. Here's another question. As editors, how do you deal with genres, I think it's supposed to be, with which you are unfamiliar when it comes to content? That's a great question. So you guys have experience editing several genres, but and I heard, Rebekah, you said that Lily has edited something and she'll say, wow, this is not my normal genre, but how do you guys navigate genres with which you are not familiar? And again, Rebekah, I know you've edited my paranormals, and you're like, Rebekah hates paranormals, but she's like, but I like Brooklyn. It's like, and she gives me great feedback. So how do you guys handle that?
Well, yeah, Rebekah did mention that. And the thing is, it's not that I'm unfamiliar with the genres, it's that I will read pretty much the only genre that I'm completely unfamiliar with are Westerns. Completely. So if someone were to come to me with one, I would actually recommend that they go elsewhere for a content edit. But if they wanted me for the line edit, they go to Rebekah for the content and come to me for the line edit and proofread. There we go. But I always make sure that I do know the genre, even if I don't necessarily like it. I make sure that I know what I'm looking for, what the genre is searching for right now. Because even, paranormal romance, things that are popular and tropes that they like and tropes that they're absolutely despising, it changes. So I always make sure that I keep on the up and up of all the genres so I can help as many of my clients. And many of my clients also write in different genres. I mean, Rebekah, I've edited steampunk for you. I've read romantic suspense, straight up romance, and erotic. So
and YA tomorrow.
And YA tomorrow, yes. I love YA.
I'm so glad that Lily is like totally comfortable with erotica and YA, because I've got two different books coming out at the same time under different pen names. And so I'm going to send her like this erotica book, and she's like, yeah, good job. And then I have to send her this YA one, and she's like, no thanks. And
I write those as well. Erotica under a pen name and then YA, so I get it.
Yes, that's why I can never fire you.
It's on camera now. She can never fire me.
I really have had people that I sent them like romance, and then I sent them like a YA book, and they were like, I don't know what to do with this, and over edited it, and I was like, I write so many genres, but when it comes to editing, I do like to read as much as I can about different. So like, I'm not a fan of paranormal, but I have read a lot of it. And my husband likes paranormal. And so I have read a lot of paranormal. And so when I go to edit it, I know exactly what the genre is expecting. And so like Lily was saying, like Westerns, I love Westerns. I'm a huge history buff. So like if anybody needs a Western edited, I'm your gal. I love editing historical stuff so much. I think historical and YA are probably my two favorite genres to edit. But I think that you also have to know your strengths, because I've actually turned down erotica a couple of times because it wasn't something that I was too familiar with, because I just don't read a lot of erotica. I write it, I read it, but sometimes I'll get a client, I'm just like, I think I'll send them over to Lily, or I'll send them to somebody else, because I'm just not familiar with that too much. And I think Lily writes better erotica than I do.
Thank you.
Hadley, what are your thoughts if you get a manuscript with and the genre you're not familiar with it?
So, in working at the different publishing houses, I have dealt with a bunch of genres. The ones that I didn't or wasn't as familiar with, I would read up on them, or I would have that discussion with the author to figure out where they're coming from and why are we in this world? What are we doing? One that I was not very comfortable within at first is paranormal, and then it seems like all of a sudden all my authors were writing paranormal. So I went from not being comfortable to being comfortable quick, just because it was my whole line of work. To the point that I'm now writing paranormal, if you can believe it. So, but usually the clients that I'm working with now.
Who is it though? We're all writing paranormal in one form or another.
What's going on right now? It's in the wind or in the water right now. So, anyway, in writing with the authors that I'm working with right now, they all seem to be writing in a genre that I'm comfortable with. So I haven't really been out of my comfort zone here lately.
Okay, awesome. So I hope that answered Armita's question. And thank you guys for answering that. So I'm going to go through with a few more questions that I have. And it's awesome because you guys in the conversation, I'm like ticking off questions off my list. One question I had was, what are the levels of editing? Because we've kind of touched on that. We've talked about proofreading, we've talked about line, we've talked about content. Can you tell the audience a bit about the different levels of editing and what they can expect with each level?
I think the first thing that any book should go through is a content and development edit. And what content and development does, for those who don't know, is it helps you develop your voice, the character's voice. It shows to make sure there are no plot holes, that everything is flowing smoothly, nothing is too stunted, nothing moving too quickly, too slowly. If something's dragged on, a content edit will show you how to condense that scene or possibly even cut it completely, which there have been a few clients of mine, they'll just see a wall of just everything, line through delete this because it was not necessary. And the biggest thing that I think content editing does in developmental is check your character's progression. Does the character grow throughout the story? Do they change? Is the goal met? Is their personal goal met? As well as, aside from a plot goal, I think a character should have a personal goal as well. So content editing is extremely important before you go into any sort of line editing or proofreading.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Rebekah, what is line editing? So Lily talked about content.
So line editing, which is my favorite, I think I'm the best at line editing, is going through and making sure that at the sentence structure level, everything flows really well so that the author is communicating accurately what's going on in the scene. And so line editing kind of blends a little bit into content editing sometimes. I think as an editor, it's really hard to edit specifically one or the other, because I do get content editing where I have to do a little bit of line editing. But line editing is basically making sure that the commas are in the right place, that semicolons are used appropriately, that the dialogue tags work, and then it kind of bleeds a little into content, because sometimes I'll say, this scene doesn't have enough description. Like, these sentences don't have the strong enough words that you're trying to get here. So, but line editing is pretty much just like a really intense form of grammar and making sure that the paragraphs function correctly. They transition into scenes really well. They've got good grammar periods, or where they're supposed to be. Sentences are complete, that sort of thing.
Okay. Hadley, anything to add? We've talked about content, line. Tell us a bit about the proofreading level.
Proofreading usually is, at the end, in my opinion, just because after, what Lily just said about development and Rebekah said about lines, you have somebody that's able to go through the whole story, read it, and make sure everything looks good. Just make sure it looks right. And really, some of that, your proofreading comes with your ARC readers. You send out your ARCs. Sometimes they'll do the proof for you and just make sure everything looks good. But even I remember, Rebekah had just said it can go through those lines of edits and all those things that go through the content development line, proofreader, ARC, everybody, your mama. And there's still mistakes. So sometimes it's a little bit frustrating, but yeah, those are the different levels. So, yeah.
And I guess kind of a spin-off out of that, because I know people watching will want to know, how much can I expect to spend on a I don't know, at the various levels. So I shoot for 55 to 60,000 words per novel. How much would a 55,000 word novel cost, depending on what I'm asking for?
With me, every editor is different. I've seen some editors charge triple what I do for the same work. I do try and keep my prices low, not only because I don't have, again, as I said, any sort of degrees in English or writing, so I feel that's fair, and I also try to keep them low as another indie author. This gets expensive. This job's expensive. The sale money is a little, especially this year, it's 2020, it's all gone downhill. So for a 50,000 word novel with basic content line and then a second look would be $100 flat rate with me.
Oh, wow. Okay. And that's pretty affordable. And, I think it's so important. I'm grateful. Thank you, Lily, for doing that, because it is tough, especially for authors who are just starting out. It does get pretty expensive. So thank you for that rate, because I know there are many people who are listening that will probably take advantage of that. So that's awesome. Rebekah,
I hope so.
I actually have never had an editor with any kind of college degree. I actually tend to gravitate towards the ones that are readers, not necessarily college educated, because they actually edit better.
Yeah.
I do charge a little more just because I have a master's in education and then the 15 years of experience. I usually say to budget for about $200 to $300, because then if you come in a little less, you have money extra to do that proofreading step or, throw into your marketing. So I actually tell a lot of clients to budget for, $300, because, you're looking at content, copy, and proofreading. And that's going to change depending on the quality of the book. So like we were talking about, if you self-edit and you've gone through your book 2 times, like Lily said, you're going to save a ton of money if you have edited your book. You have made sure that you have tried to clean up those potholes. I've had students, or I've had clients that I've had to charge upwards to $500, because it's like, this is going to take me a long time. There's a lot of work. This is going to need 5 or 6 different passes. So really getting your book in the best shape possible before getting the edit is going to save you a lot of money. But I do highly recommend that you budget for editing. And that's not even you don't even have to pay money for that. So a lot of new authors that can afford to pay money, if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'll edit your book if you edit mine, we'll just do a straight swap where there's no cash involved. And I've done that many times. Or I'll make a cover for someone, or there's PA services that I could provide. So if you're looking to edit your book, you don't have to spend a lot of money. There's other options out there for you. You just have to be willing to ask around.
Awesome. That's great advice. Something that I actually never thought of. Lily, you're going to say something?
Yeah, Rebekah actually touched on it. most, and even the price I quote, most editors, it's for 1 or 2 passes. If the book requires extra hours, extra amount of work, prices do go up, and that's the same for almost any editor. So anyone listening should know that depending on the level of editing that you need, how many passes, prices do change, and you should have to budget for that, which is why a beta reader as well as your own self-editing is going to really, really help you in the long run. Will it take a little bit longer? Yes, but it will help everyone involved.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, if anyone so I run a course called 16 Weeks to Publish. And I don't know if I know one person, one of the students is listening, but this is why we talk about beta readers and we talk about the self-editing process. And I do say that these are the steps that really make it less expensive for one when you get to that professional editing process. I push beta readers. I have my alpha reader. I push self-editing. It's a very important step because it does save money when it gets to you guys and it's as clean and as tight as possible. So those are some good points that you guys have raised.
I like that Lily touched on the beta reader too, because like I have one friend that reads everything I write, and anytime I'm just like, this is terrible, she'll be like, send it to me. And then she always says, you know, here's what you gotta fix, here's what's really good. So like, please find that super fan or that one person that is gonna be like, you're amazing, and they're in your corner, because she has seriously saved me a lot of money with me having to go through different, because I used to pay beta readers and now I don't, because she's like, okay, this is what we need to do. So yeah, having someone in your corner is awesome.
Yep. Yeah, I believe in beta readers. I actually have one. She is just so amazing. She'll probably, I don't think she's watching now. She may watch it later, but she is my alpha reader. I don't think, in fact, I know there hasn't been a book that I've released that my alpha reader has not read. And I actually ran a test. She gave me some advice and was like, Brooklyn, you need to change this. And I was like, oh no, that's not a big deal. And I published without changing it. And in the reviews, what she said came up as an issue. And from that point, I was like, whatever she said, I change it, I listen. So beta readers, alpha reader in my case, I totally agree with that. So that's awesome. Okay, I mean, so we're coming down to the end. I guess my final question, what advice do you guys, do you have for authors? You are authors yourselves, but when it gets to the editing process and when we finish writing, we've gone through our self-edits, I guess what advice or what would you say just to kind of wrap up our discussion?
The biggest one would be open to change. Be open to hearing, there might be things that you don't want to hear about your book. There have been some clients where they're not happy with some content changes, and it's just some things do need to be fixed, some things don't work in a certain way. And you do have to be open to understanding you're not just writing for yourself anymore, you are writing for the market. You are doing something, someone is paying real money for this work.
Yeah.
So make sure that you are flexible and open to learning new things, to understanding that maybe a certain way that you were doing something is not right, no matter what you're looking at, whether, not talking, of course, about voice and stuff, how we had said, but you need to make sure that you have an open mind when you go into the editing process. And also, don't be afraid to shop around. If there is an editor who is changing something you are completely uncomfortable with, make sure that you do shop around, that you do get a sample from someone else. Many of my clients came from other places, from editors who did not understand them or who wanted to change an entire manuscript, to change an entire voice. So make sure that you are getting the quality that you need, and also make sure that, again, you are keeping an open mind, because when you do accept your editor as part of your team, as most of us are now, it helps. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also like to say, do not blame your editor for bad reviews on your book. So if I review your book and I'm like, this is kind of garbage, I actually had a book once where it was so homophobic. I was like, you cannot say this. And then they published it anyway and put my name on it as editor. And I was just like, oh my God. So don't, your editor is going to try. 10% is going to get missed, though. They are only going to get 90% of those errors. 10% is going to get missed. So in 60,000 words, you're going to have probably 20 errors, and like, because we're all human. And so like, if you get a review that says your book was badly edited, please know that that's just a stupid reviewer, or that like maybe you needed a proofreader or something, but it is not your editor's fault when it is not, edited perfectly, because some of those things just skip us, and it's not our fault.
Hadley, any final words? I do have a few questions coming in, so I'm going to put them up. But Hadley, what advice would you give to authors?
I totally agree with Rebekah on that, because I've seen some of my authors take some hits on reviews, and it's like, I feel bad. Then I'm going back through the manuscript, like, what did I miss? And it's like, you know what? I'm human. I missed something. Like, stop it. So these readers are a little vicious with that. But I would say, as one comment to authors, before you send your book over to your editor, make sure you're doing your self edits as much as possible. And sometimes I'll even suggest read your own book out loud, because sometimes stuff that you've written in your mind or, quietly sounds right. But then when you read it out loud, it's like, what the hell was I saying there? I don't make any sense. So I would suggest, sometimes, even if it's dialogue of your characters, read it out loud, like they're reading it, or like they're saying it, and see if it makes sense to you. And then do that as much as you can while you're writing it before you send it over to your editor, because it's going to save him or her time with asking you, what were you saying here, because this makes no sense. So if it doesn't make sense to you, it's not going to make sense to them, and it's not going to make sense to your reader.
I have to add, Hadley, you are completely right about that. A lot of people do forget that they are writing real people. This doesn't have to be stiff and formal, unless you're writing Victorian, in which case you want stiff and formal. But I have to add on what Rebekah said about how books will get comments, this was so poorly edited. Something that readers also need to remember is, as editors, we're doing our jobs. But as the author is the one who owns the copyright to that book, they don't have to accept all of our changes. So, like Rebekah's saying, the book that was homophobic that she recommended and it didn't get cut out, that is not her fault. But as the editor, she would get blamed for not catching something like that.
Yeah.
But readers really do need to remember that as editors, we don't have the final say. The author does. The author always has the final say.
And that's interesting, because something, especially if it goes against your value system. So, you get this manuscript, it's about a topic that you wouldn't have necessarily written about, but you're being paid to edit, so you do. And then you notice something glaring, such as homophobia. The author chooses not to remove it, which they have the right to do, but your name is attached to that. How do you guys handle that? I mean, what does that look like? What does that feel like? How do you guys handle that?
I actually have, when I talk to clients the first time before I take their book, I actually do not give them permission to list my name. I think, Brooklyn, that you might be the only client that does. I think I have like 2 more, but most of the time I'll say, please, when you upload this to Amazon, do not associate my name with it. And I usually preface it with like, I edit a lot of different genres, so I would hate for your beautiful YA novel to come up with this erotica novel that has my name on it or something. But I'll usually offer, like, if it's a good book, I'll be like, please put me down as editor. I would love to represent your book. But I don't offer that often. Like, it's and I don't typically put my editors on my books either, because I would hate for something to happen and it come back on them.
Wow.
So,
and that's food for thought for me, because I think my mindset was, I have this team, it's teamwork, and I just wanted everybody to know who made this possible. But you are right, like, I need to consider whether or not what I'm writing resonates with the members of my team. I mean, my book cover artist, fine, but this is just giving me something to think about. I never even thought about it like that. So that's good stuff.
For you, though, it's brought me paranormal clients. So it doesn't bother me because then they see that you have a good cover, they see that you have good writing, and then they're like, oh, well, I want to work with that author that worked with her. So that doesn't matter. But sometimes I'll get, some subpar writing and I'm like, please don't put my name on this,
Well, that's good. And that's the other reason why I attribute the team, because I want you guys to get clients and stuff. So, okay. So I trust you. Let me know if you're like, Brooklyn, take my name off this crap. Do not associate me with this.
And I've done the same thing.
You write interracial paranormal romance. You have like all of the genres that I need to hit. So like, no way, put my name on it. Sorry.
Yeah, I've had that same issue before but mine was a rape scene. And I told the author, it was my first time working with him, I said, you gotta get rid of this. You really gotta get rid of this. This is not a horror novel, this is not. And I was surprised he listened. And the rewrite was great. So my name went in the front of it, but I did have another client who was using 2 editors simultaneously, which some do now. And the other editor, because I was getting the second, so I had the original editor's comments, and I said, if you accept the other editor's comments, you either are listing both of us or you are listing none of us. My name will not be associated with some of the things that I am seeing. And my client was great with it. They listed no one. They decided to list no one. And but yeah, it was a shock opening this manuscript. And I said, I don't want people thinking that this suggestion here that you're claiming you're accepting is from me. And so that it was great, and it is nice that we do have the right to do that now.
Awesome.
Because especially the big 5, they don't get that chance.
Right. Wow. Good. I mean, yeah, that's something I never thought about. Hadley, did you have anything to add on that, or?
So first, I don't edit under the name under Hadley Ray Dean. I edit under Phoenix Pen. So even if Phoenix Pen's going to show up if they decide to put me as their editor, so they're not going to associate that with me as an author. That's number one. Number two, I really don't require my authors to list me as their editor. If they want to, then that's on them, and that's an honor. I appreciate that. I think I only have 1 or 2 of my authors that list me as their editor. But I also try not to edit stuff that goes strictly against what I believe in. And I don't like any books that have racism and stuff in that. And I've done a couple of those, or sexism or anything like that. Like that kind of stuff rubs me the wrong way, and I don't even feel like giving it a good edit whenever I'm reading that kind of stuff. Because I don't want any form of hate or any of that in my brain whenever I'm editing it. So most of the authors that I work with, they're writing something that goes along with what I believe in too.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm able to give it a good, strong edit whenever it's something that I believe in. So
something that you can you're invested in, or you can get
invested in, and I can get behind, and I wouldn't be mad if they did put my name on it.
Awesome. Here's a question that came in. How much material is typically required for a sample edit?
Every editor is different on this one. For me, I require 2,000 words. I think that within 2,000 words, you should be able to get a decent view of plot, characters, how you write dialogue, and what the manuscript will need in general. The only thing that you won't be able to get is developmental completely, but that's not a huge issue. So if within those 2,000 words, you can't get a certain voice, you can't discern the author's voice, if you see those dialogue tags missing, I will know what the client needs even better. And when I give my assessment of the sample, almost all of my clients, actually I think except for Rebekah, have done samples from me first. And it's a bidding poll a lot recently for editors. So you have to make sure that when you're giving us the sample, that we can give you a proper edit as well. Make sure those first 2,000 words are solid.
I'm the same way. I say 2,000 to 2,500 or whatever a chapter is. And I also tell people don't send me your prologue because I hate prologues. I don't like them. I think that you should always start a book at chapter 1. So I always say either like chapter 1 or a chapter you feel like represents the book the best, and then I'll make the decision from there. It usually takes me a couple of minutes. I always have same day turnaround on samples. So yeah.
I usually ask for a chapter or a scene. Usually the ones who have sent me samples, it's usually been a chapter or a scene. And if I need to see more, then I'll go back and say, okay, look, this does not give me a good representation. Send me another scene or send me another chapter. But usually I am able to see a writing style within that chapter or scene.
So ladies, how do we contact you? How do we, if someone listening, and I think there are at least a couple of people who want to know more, how do we get in contact with you? And I'm going to, as you type, I'm going to create something to go across the screen. So let's start with Lily. Lily, how do we get a hold of you?
You get a hold of me via Partners in Crime Book Services. We have a website. We also have a Facebook. There is a 24-hour response time. And when you go there, you can also view, the reviews. We have reviews just for my editing, as well as for the other services we offer. We do book promotion, cover design, teaser design, events hosting on Facebook. We do multiple things. The biggest part of it is the book promotion and the editing. So again, once you go there, you can ask any extra questions you want via Messenger. You can view our prices, our services, book appointments, whatever the client needs. We try to be as accommodating as possible, which is again why we have a 24-hour response time. We usually get it within just a few hours. And to anyone listening, I do look forward to possibly working with you in the future and making your book the very best that it can be.
Awesome.
So mine is, I work with a really great author named Cassandra Pentakoff at Out of Your Right Mind. And so we have our website. It's just outofyourrightmind.com/editing. And that right is like WRITE, like you're writing a book. But we pretty much, I have a very open mind with editing. And so I take pretty much anything. I really love working with romance and history and lots of other things. So if you do, to anybody listening, if you would like to have me help you out with your book, I can promise you that I'm going to be really honest. I'm going to be really thorough, and I'm going to try to get a really fast turnaround time for you, despite all the other things that I juggle in my life. So, but if you're working on a budget, absolutely don't come see me, go see Lily, because she's really good and really fast. So that's my plug.
And again, Rebekah is my editor. So Out of Your Right Mind, OOYWM. It's actually just started a podcast. Shout out to Cassandra. And similar to Partners in Crime, Out of Your Right Mind, I mean, they do a plethora. So much. There's they run my my email lists, like all sorts of stuff. They do my Twitter feed. So Out of Your Right Mind, it's like a one-stop shop. So awesome. And that's where I found Rebekah. Hadley, talk to us. Where are you? How can we get you?
So I just sent you some links on the private chat just because, you're putting it up right there. Thank you. So I do my editing under Phoenix Pen, and I have a Facebook page, as well as if you want to sign up for what I offer in the service, I have a Google form that I ask my authors to fill out, which includes content editing as well as line editing. I also do formatting, so I can format, make your book look extra pretty before we get it out there to the different platforms, and we can get it out to Amazon, to Barnes and Noble, all the platforms that are out there. I do formatting for, so as well as print.
Awesome. We know where to find you guys. I guess to give a little plug for Brooklyn Night Enterprises, you guys know I do have editors on my team. So we edit also, and we do the formatting. We do Brooklyn Night Enterprises has developed to be a one-stop shop. And I'm very proud because I cater to local, so Bermudian authors. have been able to become published. I've been able to assist with the publishing process for Bermudian authors, and indeed authors who are not local. But so we have a plethora of talent and skill and services that you guys can, whoever's watching, they can benefit from. Okay, I see some final comments. Thank you. It was a great live. It really was. I think it was very informative. I think it was very important. And I was saying that to Lily before we kind of became live, that this is a great discussion. I think it's something that authors need to kind of think about and take seriously, because there are some authors who won't edit. They think they can skip that step. I don't believe that. And so that was really where this came from. I just wanted to have that conversation. So I want to say thank you to everyone for coming. You guys have been awesome. Thank you for the audience. Let me kick in my Brooklyn Night theme music one more time. All right. So I want to thank you guys again, and we will see you at the next Brooklyn Night show. Have a great evening, everyone, and thank you for hanging out with us this evening.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.